Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And Dave Dombrowski met with media today to talk about the offseason plan. I'll tell you why I really kind of like it in today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for checking us out today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been at 97.5 The Fanatic, doing sports talk radio here in Philly for 5 years. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 years, and this is my third season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing wherever you consume podcast wise. If you're watching on YouTube and are yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button. It helps us out, but also more importantly, it gets you notifications when new episodes are posted so you don't miss a thing from what's going to be a very interesting offseason for the Philadelphia Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So today, Dave Dombrowski met with media, and we're going to start by just breaking down some initial thoughts on really what he got into. Then we're going to discuss some big news. Rob Thomson got an extension today, kind of out of nowhere. We were literally just talking last episode about how he's only signed through this coming season. And at the end of all of this, I'm going to talk about whether or not the organization is right. Now, I think they may be, but we're going to go with a more logical approach of are they actually right and what the data points to from this past season. But first and foremost, in case you missed the Dave Dombrowski presser, it was about 45 minutes. I just got done watching all of it back. I listened to a little bit of it live, but then I watched the rest of it back to make sure that I'm covering everything for you guys. And the first thing he said is the whole major league coaching staff is coming back. Rob Thomson got the extension. We'll break that down coming up. But everyone's back. Kevin Long, Caleb Cotham, the whole coaching staff is back. And it kind of makes sense, right? When you look at it, if you're going to keep the manager and the manager likes the position coaches and the different bench coaches and everything, and you're giving the manager full grace to say, hey, we want you to run this team the way that you see fit, it would make sense that you're bringing back the coaching staff as well, and you're letting him bring back his guys. Like that coaching staff over 162 games, won 95 of them in the postseason. They didn't get the job done, but are you going to judge guys by 162 games or by 4 games? I know the 4 games matter significantly more, but presidents of baseball operations, GMs, guys that make these decisions in the front office, they have to be logical with stuff. They can't allow emotion to guide their decision-making, and the numbers would say that Rob Thomson has been a good manager for the Philadelphia Phillies, and the staff that he's brought with him has done a good enough job. That's it. Not the greatest job, not a perfect job, but a good enough job compared to their peers that Dave Dombrowski said we're better off with these guys than we are without them. I know that might drive some people crazy, seeing like, oh, Kevin Long's back. The approach to play has been terrible. Get a new hitting coach. They had a top 5 offense in baseball this year, guys. I know what the postseason said. Like, I know how that happened. I know we get annoyed because of what happened with the Diamondbacks and this year against the Mets, and it was brutal, and I'm still not over it. I'm not going to be over it for a long time. But if you look at it logically, I understand the decision by Dave Dombrowski. But it wasn't just about the manager and the coaching staff. He also talked about the players. So let's run through. We did our stay or go yesterday. I might have been too liberal with the goes, and I said basically everybody's staying. So he was first asked about the infield, and he kind of ran through it, and he's like, well, catcher, we're not making a change. First base, we're not making a change. Second base, we're not making a change. Shortstop, we're not making a change. And we're not making a position change with Trey Turner. He's going to be our shortstop. And then third base, we're not making a change, which is kind of what I thought, right? I thought Alec Bohm was kind of iffy because of his postseason performance and his attitude and getting yanked from after game 1 of the NLDS. But he's an all-star starter at third base as an arbitration-eligible player. You don't let those guys out of your organization and get better. Like, you just don't. There isn't a better option for the money you're spending than Alec Bohm right now. At least I don't think so. And if there is, they're not available because they're a young player that's playing well that other teams are not going to give up. So what are you going to get worse because the fan base got annoyed with the player or because that player had some attitude issues? No, you work on fixing them. You work on fixing the approach and everything like that. But the infield starters, are going to be the same on opening day in 2025 as they were in 2024. That's running it back, right? It seems like it, at least. And I was surprised how sure Dave Dombrowski was of that. Now, you're not moving Harper, you're not moving Turner, you're not moving Romito. But I figured he might leave the door open a little bit with Stott and Bohm and say, hey, listen, we think they're projectable young talent, but we don't know. Like, there are definitely still some questions about who these players are long term. So we'll have to evaluate that. No, he was saying, no, Stott, Bohm, they're here. They're good to go. So that was interesting to me, but not too surprising because the infield should be basically set. You had 3 of your 4 starting infielders were all-star starters. You're not changing that. You're just not. I don't care about what happened in 4 games in October. Like, you can't have that emotional reaction. The fan base can. I'm not saying you shouldn't be annoyed with these players with the way that they played against the Mets. But Dave Dombrowski would be kind of dumb to move on, right? That's at least what I'm seeing. But running it back is something people have been afraid of. And I said in yesterday's episode when we did Stay or Go, the place you're going to be able to make the changes is going to be in the outfield with Castellanos, a contract that they've tried to offload in the past, with Marsh, a player that, even though he's arbitration eligible, he's a guy that hasn't really projected out for him. And then Rojas, the center field, who hasn't created enough offense for what the Philadelphia Phillies are looking for. They like his defense. He still can project out to be a good player at one point. But right now he's not there, and he didn't do a good enough job this season of guaranteeing anything. Here's how Dave Dombrowski evaluated the outfield, which is crazy interesting to me. He talked about Castellanos playing 162 and being productive and all of this stuff. And he talked about him glowingly for what Nick Castellanos has been, probably underperforming the contract he's been given, but being a good player, being an all-star once. I mean, he's a guy that you're looking at and say, okay, Nick Castellanos is a solid baseball player for the Philadelphia Phillies, maybe not up to that contract, but they tried to move him last offseason. So you'd expect Dave Dombrowski to maybe leave that door open again. He did not. And not only did he say that we're pretty sure that Nick Castellanos is going to be part of our plans, like pretty darn sure, he said the same about Brandon Marsh, which is shocking to me. Now, I'm a Marsh guy. Like, my default is that I think he's a better player than what he showed in the second half. I think he can be a professional hitter. I think he is a plus defender. By the way, a little preview of tomorrow's episode. We're going to talk about Gold Glove nominations. Brandon Marsh is nominated for a Gold Glove. Anyone who fought me on the, this guy's not a plus major league outfielder, yeah. How do you feel now? Bottom line is this, though. Brandon Marsh was a guy that I was comfortable with moving on from. I think that you could do better in left field. That doesn't make him a bad player. It means that you might just continue to go the Dodgers route, right? Where the Dodgers had a great team, and then they came up short. And then they added another star, and then they came up short. And then they added another star, and then they came up short. And then they added another star, and they keep going and going and going. And they just keep paying guys, and they keep building up that roster. Like, okay, this wasn't good enough. Bigger juggernaut team next year. Like, maybe you have to go that route, and maybe you could do that by upgrading in left field. But Dave Dombrowski said the same thing about Brandon Marsh as he said about Nick Castellanos. We're pretty confident he's part of our plans. That doesn't seem to leave a lot of room for change for the Philadelphia Phillies in the outfield. The big question mark was center field. And Rojas, announced that there will be a plan for Rojas to go to Clearwater for the offseason. He's going to live down there. He's going to work through some stuff offensively. He's going to try and figure it out. He was candid about Rojas and said he's not guaranteed to be our starting center fielder next year. So he has the capability of saying, yo, we're not considering, or we're not confident this player is going to start for us or we're bringing him back. But he didn't say that about 8 of the 9 starters. That's crazy. But, well, it's not crazy like I think he's necessarily wrong. It's crazy in that I didn't expect that. I expected him to be a little bit more open to potential changes. And again, something to remember through this whole episode. This is what Dave Dombrowski said. If you know anything about GMs or presidents of baseball operations or front office executives in any sport, they don't always say exactly what they mean. They're not always 100% truthful. Sometimes they're putting stuff out there to create a market for a player or this, that, and the other thing. So we'll see if those things change over the offseason. He did say multiple times we're going to keep an open mind with stuff, so I get that. But it was interesting how focused he was on Marsh and Castellanos are part of our plans moving forward. The whole infield staying. The only question is center field. He also brought up Austin Hayes, and he's like, I like Austin Hayes. We'd like him to be a part of our plans going forward. We'll have to see how it plays out. It sucks he had the injury and the illness, which is basically the way I've been evaluating it the whole time. The starting rotation, he said you have 4 starters already locked in. Sanchez, Suarez, Wheeler, Nola, all here, all under contract. No worries. Taijuan Walker, he said he's going to have to compete for a spot in spring training, but no guarantee he's going to be our 5th starter. He did talk a little bit about Andrew Painter, say, well, he's going to be on an innings limit because he's coming off that Tommy John surgery and still working his way back. We'll see what he can be, but he's not going to go out and throw like a crazy amount of innings at the major league level next year. So you probably are going to have to bring in a 5th starter. He said he really likes Rafael Marchand as a backup guy, and Edmundo Sosa is still under contract. And then the bullpen, he said, well, the bullpen, you always try and evaluate your bullpen. We thought we had some really good guys, but something interesting that he said about the bullpen, keep this in the back of your mind for the rest of the offseason. He said our staff has done a really good job, talking about the coaching staff, not the pitchers, but our staff has done a really good job of developing guys that aren't high-profile bullpen arms into really good pitchers. To me, the translation of that is, yeah, the bullpen, we like the guys we have, but we kind of created them out of nowhere. So could we do that again with other guys that are cheaper and change where payroll is and allow opportunities in other spots, not cut payroll? Because he did say he wouldn't comment on exactly what payroll is going to be, but he did say he could see them being aggressive in payroll. Again, doesn't believe that there's any reason that should change. So more of the same for the Philadelphia Phillies, which seems to drive people insane. But when you're a 95-win division winner, I understand it. It sucks for the fan base in this immediate aftermath of the loss to the Mets and this backwards roll from the postseason perspective that we're seeing. But from the talent level of the team, I believed it was a very, very talented baseball team. I still do. It sucks the way the season ended, but I kind of get where Dave Dombrowski's coming from. I'll tell you more about that coming up. But the more interesting thing was just like Rob Thomson randomly getting an extension out of nowhere. I thought that was weird for multiple reasons. And I'll tell you why coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. But first, let me tell you about our friends over at Game Time. They're the absolute best. They bring you today's episode, and they also bring you the best ticket deals in the business. Now, Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, but I know what you're saying, Connor, the Phil's done. Well, Game Time doesn't just do baseball. They do basketball, hockey, football, college football, concerts, comedy, theater, everything you need a ticket for. There's a chance you can find those tickets on Game Time. And if you do find those tickets on Game Time, if your event is listed, well, you know you're going to get a great deal. And you know it's going to be an easy process because they have so much great stuff. They have Game Time Picks, which is curation for you that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all that stuff I just listed. They have flash deals so you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats and everything. They have all-in pricing, so those fees don't just shock you at the end. You see the full price up front, you know what you're paying. That makes it easier to decide what you can afford. They also give you views from your seat so you know what your look is going to be before you get to your event. And the Game Time guarantee means that you'll be credited 110% of the difference if you find seats in the same row and section for less anywhere else. Game Time is amazing. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and more with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. This Rob Thomson thing is very, very interesting to me for a couple of reasons. So he was signed through 2025. And today, Dave Dombrowski announced at the very start of the press conference, we've extended Rob Thomson through 2026. Now, the first thing that I think about, and Dave Dombrowski kind of brought this thought process up throughout the press conference when asked about it, if you've seen the movie Moneyball about the Oakland Athletics, who are not in a great spot right now, but in that, the manager of that team talks to Brad Pitt's character, Billy Beane, the GM of the team, and says, hey, it's hard to manage on a one-year contract. There's not a lot of faith in that. I'm paraphrasing, but basically the line. And that's a sentiment that I think a lot of managers, coaches at professional level would echo that. Hey, I'm not signed through next year. So I want to manage this team and I want to do my best, but it puts a lot of pressure on me to make snap decisions in the moment that may not be best for the team to try and protect myself. It's not a lot of faith shown, especially for a guy that's won you a division title for the first time in 13 years, took you to the World Series, took you to the League Championship Series. Rob Thomson has had more success than he's had failure. He has. I know it doesn't feel that way because he doesn't have a World Series trophy, but trust me, look around baseball. Rob Thompson's a pretty darn good manager. But there's more than just the quality of the manager. I know some people are upset today because Rob Thomson got that extension. They wanted to see him go on. They don't trust his decision making. Listen, if you want to question his ability as a strategist, absolutely. Totally fair. If you want to question his ability as a guy that can lead a team through 162 games and deliver a healthy team to the postseason and keep the locker room in great shape the whole time he's been here, if you question that, you're crazy because that's his expertise. So he's good at this. He's not so good at this. I mean, we've all played video games where you have development points and you got to decide, like, let's just look at MLB The Show, for example. You're all baseball fans. You can make a power hitter. The guy's not going to have great contact. He's not going to be very fast until you get deeper into the game. You can make a guy that's a good defender, a fast player. You're not going to hit many home runs. Like, you have to pick and choose some things they're good at. Nobody's perfect. And Rob Thomson has an elite skill set in one aspect and leaves a lot to be desired in another one. And the Phillies are clearly willing to take that trade off. But not only does the extension mean that they trust Rob Thomson, not just for this year, but for potentially 2026, if they do indeed decide to continue with that contract. Now, they can move on from him. They could fire him. It's not a guarantee that he's the manager, but like giving him that extension, it shows you how they feel about him. What's also weird to me, though, is that Rob Thomson brought up when he was, before he got this job, right? Before he became the manager of the Phillies, stepped in for Joe Girardi midway through the 2022 season. He was on his way out of baseball. It's like, I've done this forever. Never got the shot to be a manager. Whatever. I've come to terms with I've been the baseball coach that I'm going to be. I'm ready to hang it up. Like, I'm about done with my baseball coaching career. And then he gets the shot to be the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, and the magical World Series run happens, and he's like, oh, okay. I could get used to this. And then he goes to the League Championship Series in 2023 and then wins the division in 2024. But through that whole time, you can't help but think that Rob Thomson, a guy who was ready to hang it up before he was given this opportunity, doesn't still think about how long do I want to do this for. And I said in yesterday's episode, it could be hey, he manages the team in 2025 and whatever happens, you go ahead and shake hands at the end of it and say, thank you so much for the time, Rob. Appreciate you. Enjoy retirement. And he hangs him up and he's done coaching baseball for the rest of his life. I'm sure his family wouldn't mind having him around to spend more time with him. And I'm sure at this point in his life, he's considered that. So it's not just interesting from the Phillies' perspective. It's interesting from Rob Thompson's perspective. And to me, what that says is he's got unfinished business here. And he's committed to making sure that this team gives as best a shot as possible at bringing a trophy back here to Philadelphia. He's committed. He wants to win. He doesn't want to end his coaching career. And he was willing to agree to that extension as well. Like, here's the thing. We look so much from the Phillies side of, should you extend Rob Thompson? You don't consider do I want to be here? Do I want to continue to deal with the fan base questioning my every move? Do I want to continue to deal with the stresses of falling short in the postseason? There are some guys who would say, man, I need to change the scene, or I need to hang it up altogether. Clearly, Rob Thompson's still in a good spot. Clearly, the Phillies still like him. So anyone who's having that fire Rob Thompson conversation, don't. All right? Save your breath. He's not going anywhere. And if they have a complete collapse of a 2025 season, could he be gone? Sure. I don't see why anything's not on the table, but they're still a very talented baseball team, so I don't see them completely collapsing unless they have an injury situation like the Braves had this year. And even that Braves team made the postseason. Now, that team has had worse playoff collapses than the Phillies, and Brian Snitker's still the manager down there. So I don't know. I think it was silly to consider Rob Thompson as a potentially fired head coach, or manager, I should say. I'm used to talking about firing as a head coach for the Eagles. Nick Sirianni's a different story. But I do think that there's fair questions about Rob Thompson, and they were just about all put to bed by the organization's backing of him and giving him that contract extension 1 year through 2026. And him bringing back his staff, well, that would seem to make the most sense, right? You don't want to have all this turnover and new coaches and new systems and new stuff to put in. Some people want to see the approach change. Some people look at it and say, well, hey, if you continue to hone the same approach you've been going at, will it yield better results? So there's arguments on both sides. The stronger arguments, or I guess the louder arguments, would be for the change of approach, considering how they didn't hit in the postseason. But Dave Dombrowski didn't seem too worried about that during today's press conference. He wasn't happy, but evaluating 4 games as opposed to 162 games, it sounds crazy. And that's what they've got to do, but it's not fair, and you have to have logic. So I guess that brings us to our final question, which is what we're going to talk about to round out the episode. Are they right? Like, logically, are the Philadelphia Phillies right to essentially run it back and bring back the manager and all the coaches and a lot of the players and the bullpen and the starting rotation and say, hey, we're just going to take another crack at this thing for where we're at? Are they right to do that? It's going to be a tough question to answer, but we're going to do it coming up next. First, let me tell you about FanDuel, though, because the NFL season is rolling. You want to get in on it with FanDuel if you have not yet. And also, basketball's starting soon. Hockey's already gotten going. You've got a lot of great sports going on right now, not to mention college football. And I guess I got to talk about it. Baseball playoffs are still going on, even though the Phils are sitting at home. Bottom line is there's a million sports to bet on, and FanDuel gives you the best chance to win on all of them. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to have this app open and that app open, and you're watching the game here and you're listening to a stream of another game here and you're following stuff on social media here. No, put that all together in the same place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game with FanDuel, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Again, you'll get started with $200, $2 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead and check them out. They're America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. That's FanDuel.com. So are the Philadelphia Phillies right to run it back? Logically, I'm going to try and take all emotion out of it. And you might be saying to yourself, Connor, you haven't been fair, because you've been saying, well, you can't make an emotional reaction, but you're kind of being emotional with how much you love this team and rooted for this team and like these players, and maybe the wool's being pulled over your eyes a little bit. And to that, I'll say fair, totally fair. I like a lot of players on this team. I love this baseball team. I want to see them win, but I'm also blindly positive at points. I wouldn't say I'm blindly positive at points, but I'm more positive than a lot of the fan base skews for the majority of the time. So here's the way that I'm going to break down whether or not the Philadelphia Phillies are right. And we won't know until October next year whether or not this strategy that it sounds like they're employing of running it back is going to work, because people were mad at it last year, and that was an LCS loss. Now, a league divisional series loss, it's going to be a tough sell. Dave Dombrowski's a good salesman, but this fan base is going to question every step this offseason, and I understand it. Here's why I lean more towards them being right than wrong, and I'm going to try and take like the positivity part out of it. But this is, I swear to God, this is me being as logical as I can be. So you have a team that has over a 162-game regular season. A huge sample size, right? They've gone from 87 wins to 91 wins, I believe it was, to 95 wins. They have incrementally increased every year. They won the division after finishing top wild card in 2023, after barely sneaking in 2022. It's weird because the regular season success seems to counter the postseason success, but part of that is weird and circumstantial. Part of that is playoff baseball is inherently unfair. Like, could you imagine? Just imagine this. For example, so a football season is 17 games. Let's just live in the 16-game world because it translates to 162 much better. Then you make it to the postseason, and one game would be the equivalent of 10 baseball games, right? The Phillies played 4. That's not even a half. Could you imagine a team plays all year long in the NFL, and then you get like 25 minutes to prove which team's the better team? That would seem crazy, right? I know they're one and done, but like, That would be nuts. The same could be said for basketball and hockey with the lengths of their season, even though they're 82 games. Like, baseball is such a long season. And then you end up in a spot where everything's done in a week, and it's inherently lucky. And there's a randomness to it. And the teams that are left now, some of them are the high payroll teams, and some of them are low payroll teams, and some of them are really good favorites from the start, and some of them are surprises that came out of nowhere. It's just like, do you value the regular season over the postseason? You can't. But do we overvalue the postseason compared to the regular season? Absolutely, we do. When it comes to making determinations about what teams and players are. Logically, the bigger sample size seems to make the most sense for how good a team is. And your conversation to the counter of that would be, well, postseason baseball is a different animal. The pressure's higher. So you could be good over 162, and then the pressure could mount and you could stink. And that's valid. We've seen it happen to great players in the past. The ultimate example, Clayton Kershaw, and the way he's been in the postseason for basically his whole career. Like, great regular season pitcher, postseason can't figure it out. We've seen guys that are not good in the regular season turn it on in the postseason. So it is a different beast, but let me ask you this question. Take everything out of it, right? Like, let's pretend you're the Los Angeles Dodgers and you lost to the San Diego Padres in the divisional series. Now, they didn't, and they're playing the Mets in the league championship series right now. But imagine you did. Would you then say, well, Dave Roberts got to go? A guy that's been a really solid, trustworthy manager out there, consistently gets the team to win. They win division titles basically every year. They just roll through the NL West, and a talented division at that in the NL West. Would you move on from Mookie Betts or Freddie Freeman or Shohei Ohtani? Would you look at changes at that place? Would you move on from Teoscar Hernandez, who was an all-star and won the home run derby? Would you move on from those guys out there? Would you change the bullpen around? Now, their starting pitching has not been as solid as the Phillies, but they just signed Yoshinobu Yamamoto this past offseason. He hasn't had the most stellar first campaign. He's been dealing with some stuff here and there over the course of a season, as people do when they move over here to the major league level or when they move up to the major league level from the minors. But if you saw the Dodgers just like cut payroll and move on from a bunch of guys and change a bunch of stuff in their outfield and infield and everywhere, you'd say, wow, they're panicking. Like, that's what I would say. That's the best example of trying to take emotion out of it. I would say that team is trying to find something, but they are getting worse in hopes they'll end up better. That seems like an emotional strategy. That seems like, I don't like this player. I associate them with losing. We're going to move on from them. We're going to find a player that's less talented on paper and hope that they fit better. I will never, ever, 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 I will die on this hill. I will lose using this strategy. It is the only way you can handle things, especially in baseball. I will never advocate for an organization getting worse for the simple sake of changing scenes of players. I won't. Unless a player is disgruntled, right? Unless you get to a situation where it's like, I will not play for your team. I do not want to be here. Like, let's say, and it'll never happen, but Bryce Harper was like, I don't want to be a Philly anymore. I'm not going to play here. I'm annoyed. Like, this is not the place I want to be. You're going to have a worse option if you move on from Bryce Harper, but you have to because he doesn't want to be here, right? Short of that, though, like, Alec Boehm's a perfect example. Do you want to get worse because you don't like the player? Because you worry about October? Because he played 4 bad games? Sure. Like, yes, he was in a bad stretch going into the postseason. He's had good stretches over the past 365 days. I look at Alec Boehm and I say, are you going to find another third baseman for the same amount he's getting paid or close to it that's going to be as good or better than Alec Boehm? I don't think you are. And that's tough. But when you put all your eggs in the basket of high-profile players or really good players, or you bring in prospects and you put them in positions and they, over 162, seem to play out to the way you want them to, it's very hard to then look at the postseason and say, well, that undoes everything we believed in for the past 162 games. You can't really do that. Like, logically, you can't really do that. Maybe that's right and maybe that's wrong. And maybe you want to take the chance or maybe you don't. But Dave Dombrowski is not in a game of chance. He's in a game of logic and he's in a game of percentages, and he's in a game of dollars and cents, and he's in a game of believing talented players are going to be talented enough to get it done. And at some point, you just have to put the best team out on the field and hope. And the Phillies, very well for their situation, could have the best possible team already. There may not be many spots where they can upgrade, and we already kind of went through that. So are they right? Logically, yes. In practice, who knows? And that's the risk that you're going to take. But you can't make illogical decisions and sell them to the fan base based on, well, I don't like this player, or I don't know if he's going to be clutch. Like, you can't do that. That's not how they operate. That's not how you work through building a baseball team. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the Phillies are locked into these guys. And Dave Dombrowski basically said, hey, we're running it back. We're going to live and die with these players. So that's what you got. And that's what the press conference was. So let me know in the comments if you liked what he had to say, disliked what he had to say, liked what I had to say, or if you hate the message, whatever the case may be. It seems that this offseason is going to be a little bit less volatile than I initially thought and that a lot of people hope for. Tomorrow on our next episode, we're going to talk some Gold Glove nominations because those came out, and the Phillies, well, they're highly represented. And we're also going to break down some of what Rob Thomson said in his press conference. So we'll get into all that on tomorrow's episode, but that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for checking us out. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. That really helps us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'll talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.